Welcome to the Relationship Diversity Podcast, where we celebrate, question, and explore all aspects of relationship structure diversity, from soloamory to monogamy to polyamory and everything in between, because every relationship is as unique as you are. We'll bust through societal programming to break open and dissect everything we thought we knew about relationships, to ask the challenging but transformational questions: who am I, and what do I really want in my relationships? I'm your guide, Carrie Jaroslaw, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive, and coach. Join me as we reimagine all that our most intimate relationships can become. Today's episode is part of our conversation series. I'm just one voice in this relationship diversity movement, and it's important to bring more unique perspectives into the conversation. Today, I'll be talking with Dr. Joli Hamilton all about creative monogamy, what it is, and how to explore it in a conscious and intentional way. We talk about how embracing the process of this exploration can bring you the immense freedom to imagine the limitless potential of your most fulfilling relationship experiences. But first, a little about her. Dr. Joli Hamilton is the relationship coach for couples who color outside the lines. She's a research psychologist, TEDx speaker, best-selling author, and AASECT certified sex educator. Joli also co-hosts the Playing with Fire podcast with her anchor partner, Ken. Joli's been featured in the New York Times, NPR, and Vogue. She spent the past 2 decades studying and reimagining what love can be if we open our imaginations to possibility. Joli helps people create non-monogamous partnerships that are custom-built for their authentic selves. No more shrinking, pretending, or hiding required. Let's get into the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Relationship Diversity Podcast. I have an amazing guest with me today. I'm talking to Dr. Joli Hamilton. Welcome, Joli.
Thank you so much for having me, Carrie. I'm always excited to talk relationships.
Yes. And when I love this line really drew me to you. You are a relationship coach for couples who color outside the lines. And that really piques my interest because I talk a lot in this podcast about busting through all of these boxes, which is coloring inside the lines. Funny enough, when I was growing up, I always liked to color inside the lines. And I'm realizing that I don't live that way. So, but talk a little bit more about your story, how you got to be a relationship coach for couples who color outside the lines. We'd love to learn more about you to begin with.
Yep. Well, I appreciate this angle in because I did not become a relationship coach because I was good at relationships out of the gate. I got there because I screwed up everything. And part of how I screwed it up was by trying to color inside the lines while very clearly not fitting in those spaces. I just didn't. And so my early story is of, high school sweetheart. I was looking to get out of a pretty traumatic household where it was very clear that the way out was to get married. The women in my family get married at age 20 and you get out. So I got engaged at 17 at my senior prom. And, I did a couple years at college and got that associate's degree and then immediately got married. And that was my first time trying to just jam myself into the box, jam myself into the lines. But at every turn, I would then do things that screwed up my life, right? I wanted to be different. I wanted things to feel right. And so in trying to get my inner sensation of feeling right, feeling authentic to match my life, I would fit, I would not fit. So I would try to reshape the box, right? What this would look like is, deciding to get married, but then choosing someone who had really no desire to meet my weird needs, my weirdness, right? Choosing someone who looks good on paper instead of someone who was going to meet my weird little soul where it was. And then choosing to have children right away. Another way to like fit into the box, like I'll get married, I'll have children. But then choosing to home birth them and homeschool them and like choosing all of these off the beaten path ways so that I was both in the lines and out of the lines. And before long, fast forward 10 years, and I've now got 4 biological children, and I have busted boxes while trying to pretend like I fit in them for this whole time, like for 13 years with this lovely human who did marry me. And then I fell in love with someone else. And it wasn't the first time I'd fallen in love with someone else. I had fallen in love with my best friends over and over and over again since I was a child. I'm bisexual. I always knew I was bisexual. But you married a boy. Like, it was the 90s. And my scripting was like, but you marry a boy. Yeah, you can want all the pussy you want, but you marry a boy.
Right.
So
I grew up in that time too. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know anything else was possible.
Mm.
And then when I would fall in love with my best friends, I wouldn't act on it, but I would just be in love with them. And it happened over and over and over again. It was never a problem. My husband knew, he knew how I felt. He knew it was part of our sexual fantasies. Like, that was all fine. But then one day I fell for somebody with a penis. Oops. I broke the rule. I broke the unspoken rule, and I didn't even know it was a rule.
Wow.
But it broke everything. It shattered my illusions. I was completely disillusioned because I thought I was in this monogamous relationship that worked a certain way, that had space for me to be in love with other people and even in lust with them and not act on it because I was monogamous, but that it could be part of my inner erotic self. When this took the form of someone who was a real person, like they all had been, who had a penis, all of a sudden, this was a huge problem, like an earth-shattering problem. And now, a lot of times when I tell this story, I just say, yeah, I hopped into the shower one night and said, oh my God, I'm completely head over heels for Ken. And people are like, well, that was dumb. What did you think was going to happen? And I'm like, I get it. I hear you, but hear me out. Inside the lines I thought I was in, it fit, it made sense. But it turned out I had always been coloring my own shapes. I had always been designing my own life. I just didn't realize that my life partner really, really wasn't okay with that. So he had made as much space as he could, but this one actually crossed a line for him. And he wasn't ready, willing, and able to do the self-reflection that would get him to a spot where this was okay. So things got real messy real fast. And now 14 years later, well, I mean, I'm 4 degrees, 3 certifications, and hundreds and hundreds of conversations, thousands of conversations to figure out how to do this better for all of us who don't fit in those lines.
Wow. Okay. So I love the way that you talk about the messiness, because I think, we grow up, right? I grew up in a similar time. I grew up in the 80s and late 80s and 90s, and definitely shown a way to be, even bisexuality. Now, I was in theater early on, so I saw different sexual expressions and attractions very early as 12. So I knew that was around, but still in my little world, in my world of, like, that was the older people that did that, but I am this, and this is what is expected of me. And my parents went through a divorce where my father had an affair, which really colored the way that I looked at relationships, right? So how did you, I guess, work on from that moment of your husband saying that's crossing a line with me to 14 years later? Can you lead us through some of the really pivotal moments that were big aha moments and how that shaped kind of the next chapter?
For sure. So that really started a cascade, right? And I think that's what all transformation moments are. There's the change that happens. So a divorce precipitated, like there's the change, the outer change. But the transformation, the transition that happened, right? Psychological transition is about an ending, an in between, and then a new beginning. And we can't rush that. And that's not my work. That's William Bridges' work on transitions. Amazing. If you're going through transitions, look that up. But when I was experiencing the change from the outside, I had to give myself time to adjust. But life doesn't give you time when you have children and a business to run and all of these things. So I chose to go along with the divorce process and because I felt like it was the right move. We definitely had reached a tipping point, and the relationship had lots of other reasons why it was easy to look back over my shoulder and say, oh, this should have ended at many points along the way, like for both of our sakes. But I then jumped into a triad. So the person who I had fallen for was, it turns out, unbeknownst to me, in an open relationship.
Oh.
So his wife was like, okay, cool. Within a very short period of time, I found myself living with them. And now we're raising 7 children together, and we're trying to figure out how that works. And so that was, I would not call that an inflection point. I would say it was like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, because instead of having to figure out, how do I do this monogamous relationship in a more creative way, I went to, how do I do non-monogamy? But I had no language. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was doing. And no one around me had much in the way of language. And it was 2009. We had the ethical slut, but we really didn't have anything else that was easily findable from my little small town, Western Massachusetts location. So what for me was, it was this process of about 6 years of self-discovery. And the only way I could figure out how to do that was to go back to school. So I got a bachelor's in psychology, then a master's and PhD in depth psychology, Jungian psychology, and then a sexuality certificate and all of these other things, because I wanted to find my path out. And since nobody outside could tell me, here's what you do, here are the things, here are the skills you need to learn, the moves you need to be able to make, the way you need to be able to move inside your relationship. Since nobody could tell me, I was like, I guess I'm going to have to go figure it out. So I took the longest road possible. So it's not like I experienced some moment where I'm like, oh, I'm there. I got there. And I went from monogamous paradigm to non-monogamous paradigm. That it was a massive internal transition where now I'm like, oh, I've been polyamorous my whole life. This is my orientation for me. I have plenty of lovers who just choose to practice non-monogamy or choose to practice creatively in their monogamous relationships. That's not how it works for me. So when I was going through this process, it was about learning skills of communication, learning skills of transition, learning how to bear the grief of what was and all the imagined futures that I could have had. And then allowing myself to experience what I probably would have called rejection, and embracing that and saying, oh, if I'm going to be coloring outside the lines in relationship, it's not going to look like everybody else's. And I'm not going to be the right fit for everyone. And that's okay. And really starting to be okay being with myself.
Yes, which is the key, right? I find that, any journey out of the lines is a massive unraveling process, right? It is an unraveling of identity, of programming, societal, familial, cultural programming, to really go in the depths of who you are and how you want to show up in relationships. And it does take a process. I know when I was going through the process, it was, there were moments, right, where I wanted to rush it, and just be like, can I just be where I can vision it? I see it, but it's so, because I think it's like going inward feels uncomfortable, right? And we all want to get to the more comfortable. We don't, but I guess finding the comfort in the uncomfortable, or finding the, where the transition, the transformation can come from being in the uncomfortable, can be pretty transformative. but getting to know yourself, like that is, I think, the most important thing, because you can't know what you want if you really don't know yourself, and then be able
Right.
to communicate that. So all the things that you talk about.
Right. So frequently I have people come to me and they're like, I know I want more. But
Mhm.
when I start probing a little bit, they struggle to say what that more would look like, because they are both, on the one hand, confined by what society and conditioning has presented to them as, like, let's say, that blank coloring page.
Mhm.
On the other hand, they're also frequently constrained by their imagination. They
Mhm.
don't even recognize that's actually harder. I find that unpacking the cultural paradigms is, at this point, much simpler. I can
Mhm.
usually say to people, like, where did you learn that? And they'll go through, oh, that's not even my stuff. That's my
Mhm.
mom's stuff. That's the church's stuff. That's just what I think is normal. The harder part is, and this was my big struggle, what can I imagine is possible?
Mhm.
Because the constraints of my imagination will absolutely constrain not just what kinds of relationships I can create, but how happy I can be within them.
Mhm.
I normalized on being miserable in relationships. The message I got as a child is, you choose someone who will put up with your shit, you count yourself lucky, and then you
Mm.
just stick it out.
Mm.
And then, even as I was trying to create new things, I could feel occasionally how, my imagination is constrained because at core, I believe that unhappiness in relationships is normal.
Mhm.
And so I had to really wrestle with, like, what would it be like for me to be happy in a relationship? And this is where I actually circle back to my first husband, and I think, oh, we never had words for this. But in truth, he wanted to be content with what was. And he
Mm.
was content. I never was. And so it looked like it was each other's fault. It looked like it was because of the relationship. In actuality, I think it had a lot more to do with how we were conditioned, and then how we accepted the limitations of our imagination. And
Mhm.
then we made that our whole life. And so by 32, I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Falling in love was a gift. Falling in love, falling in lust for someone else was a gift, because it broke my imagination. All of a
Mm.
sudden I was like, I I want something that's not possible. Wait, if I can imagine it though, I was also told if I can imagine it, I could possibly be it.
Mhm.
How do I reconcile that? And that's where the learning came in. That's where I was like, I'm going to have to learn how to do not just relationships to others, but relationships to myself completely differently, which is why I followed a path into depth psychology, where we take very seriously your imagination
Mhm.
and your relationship to self, your rich inner world, because that's where you can actually reimagine your life to be almost anything. I mean, as
Yeah,
long as it's not
so
hurting others, right?
right, right. So as you were going through that process, what did your imagination lead you to? What was the vision, your like most beautiful, broadest vision of what your relationship like life would look like?
I look back to that 32-year-old self and her naivete and her ingenue. She desperately wanted this world with more adults to raise these children, like a real community. Very like old school sort of communal living. Like, let's love who we love and raise our families together. And the trouble is, we're not really trained for it. So it breaks all the paradigms. And the roadblock I found is, I couldn't, in the place I was at, I couldn't find the people to do it with. I just didn't, not in time. I already had the children. So I couldn't vision forward. So the trouble I ran into was, oh, I have this vision. It's beautiful. And even that triad that I tried to start, one of us wound up not wanting it and so left. So then I was back to this duality, this pair, like, oh my gosh, I'm back to this conventional looking relationship. And it would have been the easiest to just say, like, well, I love you, so let's just do what people do. And so the new vision for me had to be, hey, I can't magically manifest people who want to live that communal life. But can I allow myself to truly experience the paradigm of non-monogamy, of allowing for relationships to become whatever they might become, right? Like breaking the monogamous like rules. Can I imagine that without this like lovely polycule forming around me sort of magically? And that's been my real challenge. And that's the work of it for me. Now I'm 14 years in and I'm like, yeah, I love non-monogamy. And the form it is for me is the form it is for me. For me, it's dating. It's romantic friendships that are what most other people would call platonic because we don't have sex per se, but there's a deep level of romantic connection.
Mhm.
There is also this profound realization that my partner's body and soul are his,
Mhm.
and his to do with what he pleases. And so that's the practice of living every day really outside of the lines of monogamy, where I might more easily be like, I have him. I've got him. I've
Yeah.
got him. Right. And it's hard to live here. I'm not saying it's easy. It's challenging. I have to challenge my own desire to have a false safety. When I look
Mm.
back at my first marriage, I'm like, oh, I hoped that the rules of matrimony would keep me safe.
Right.
But they didn't even keep my own heart safe from wandering, let alone my partner's. And so now my safety is found in prioritizing growth over comfort every
Mm.
day. And
Yes, I say the same thing. And I, we were talking a little bit before this about, like certain life choices that you make and prioritizing, right? I agree. If I would never tell anyone to do non-monogamy or to go into it if they weren't called to their own inner growth and evolution, that this is so much about personal evolution. And if you're not willing to go there, then this might not be for you,
right.
you know?
And it's
Um,
not going to be about having sex with a lot of people. It is
right.
all about personal growth. In fact, my anchor partner, who I am married to, is like he's the shyest version of a non-monogamous hottie I've ever met, right? So for him it's all about not having those lines and instead living in that space of personal growth all
Mhm.
the time.
Yeah, and it allows for everything, your relationship, yourself to evolve and to not stay in that. Like, I think we hold on to things so much because of comfort with the sacrifice of our own personal evolution. And what I love that you just explained, a little bit about your relationship structure, how it's been, is that I talk about a lot of like every relationship is as unique as you are. And so you're unique, you're a unique individual, plus your partner or partners are unique individuals equals an unique relationship. And the freedom that if you can go into that kind of design, um, that could lead to such freedom to free up your imagination, just like you're saying, and to get clear about the things that you want to experience. So, with that, I want to talk a little bit more about your definition of creative monogamy. I love the way that sounds. I don't know a lot about it. And so, I'd love for you to explain what that means.
Yeah. So this is the term I use to describe something most people actually really intuitively already understand. So
Mhm.
creative monogamy is about having a relationship where we are consciously deciding and negotiating where we're going to be exclusive and where we're going to be expansive.
Mm.
So in other words, we are not just accepting but this is just what is. This is obviously true. This is the rules. This is the norm. We're instead interrogating what a relationship is, and we're looking across the domains of sex. Sure, that's the one people tend to jump to, but sensuality, physical touch, romantic attention, influence, finances, co-parenting, like,
Mhm.
and we're actively saying, here are the areas I want to be expansive. I am not, in fact, going to be completely exclusive. And most people aren't. Most people allow their partners to have friends. And I don't like the word allows there, but for the
Right.
purpose
Yeah.
of this, most people are like, oh, yeah, of course you can have friends. So we're already primed for what expansivity might look like.
Mm.
Expansivity, though, is about removing that word allow and saying, no, we practice We practice expansivity. And so it kind of, for instance, if someone is saying, I want to be creatively monogamous, they might say, for instance, I want to have exclusive sexual relationship with this person, but I want to be expansive in our emotional and friendship relationships. And how that might look is defining what qualifies as sexual contact. What is that exactly? Because most people don't actually know. And that includes sex therapists, educators, and counselors as well. Like, we all have to define it for ourselves, and then we have to define it in the context of the relationship. So we get clear on what sex is. We get clear on what friendship is, what emotional connection is. And then we get in the trenches and we actively live that. In this particular instance, it would mean that there's no such thing as an emotional affair. We would say, no, we're practicing emotional intimacy, emotional expansivity is the norm for our relationship. And so now we're practicing trust, communication, boundary setting still exists, of course, because we still have issues of transparency and privacy. But this is where we start to really have relationships that allow you to be who you want to be in a relationship, and doesn't discount the fact that you might still want exclusivity in some places. You know, for instance, many people are like, I'm only going to own a home with one person. Okay, cool. Somebody else might be like, you know what? Actually, I would love to own a home with 4 or 5 people, but I only want to co-parent with one person. For me, I was like, oh, please sign up all the parents who want to show up to the party. I'm into it. So this is where most people are like, I get this, but I didn't do it, because what it requires is for us to thoughtfully break down the domains of relationship and really get into where do I want to be exclusive? Where do I want to be expansive? And then what does that look like in practice? And I walk people through this all the time. It is
and
eye-opening.
You just defined to me. So I talk about how I teach people and work with people to bring consciousness to their relationship. So what is a conscious relationship? You just talked about it. It is being thoughtful and intentional with all the aspects of it. And then the expansive part, what I love about that is it's so empowering, right? Because like I think about my parents, right? And my father having an affair and how that is very disempowering. It sets up like the victim mentality. And part of me going into non-monogamy was about calling back my power from that and saying, like, because my first experience with an open relationship was with a boyfriend in between my 2 marriages. And he had spent 20 plus years in a marriage that he cheated on from the very beginning. And he was in kind of a spiritual, like, unfolding, unraveling, dark night of the soul. And he came to me and he was honest with that whole relationship. And I said, well, this is great. This is me empowering myself to say, I don't want to be lied to, and I'm not going to play that game. So let's just be open and deal with all the feelings that came up, which was a lot.
It's not like it's nothing.
But let's just deal with it and call it and be conscious in it and in the decisions that we make and how we move forward. It was so empowering and healed not only how I saw relationships from then on, but healed the experience with my parents as well. So it was like such a healing experience.
Right. Because most people, I see so many people come into my world, and one of the wounds is that one of their parents was infidelitous, right? And then they often got very clear with themselves and they said, I will never be that person. And the person they're usually saying they will never be is the cheated on partner. They're like, no, I will never be that. So that this brings up all of your feelings when you're like, okay, what if I was non-monogamous? Your inner children are like, no, 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 no. We said we would never accept that. So now I have to really come to grips with, wait a minute, there is a difference between cheating, infidelity, betrayal, and expansivity that is negotiated, clear, and made part of our growth process, because those are just 2 entirely different experiences. But I find that most of us have like an inner 4-year-old or an inner 12-year-old who's running the show around this. Like they've got the microphone and they're like, wah! So we have to get through that, deal with those inner parts, and then recognize that we actually get to decide. We get to define how exclusivity and expansivity work. And from here, some people walk through, my program is a year long, right? And some people walk all the way through the year of opening and they explore expansivity, they explore where they're going to be exclusive, they get clear about how they negotiate their relationship agreements. We have many processes for that. And some of them realize that they actually really enjoy many pieces of monogamous exclusivity. And so now they've chosen it. Now it's a conscious choice to be primarily monogamous. And the reason I leave the word creative in there is because most of them opt to keep at least some areas of expansivity. And that's the adventure. It's, maybe they don't keep the sex, or maybe they don't keep the emotion, even the deep emotional connections. But most of the time they discover something that they're like, oh, this is too valuable to go back to an unreflective, we're just going to follow the rules paradigm. Instead, we're going to do this new third thing. Jung would say, like Carl Jung's work would say, that's the third thing that can only be born by holding the tension of the two opposites, right? They grab that and they're like, oh, the third thing, we made it. We made it by exploring this fully.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know unless you know.
You have to have some experience.
You don't know what you don't know.
Right. And because we can envision our partner like exploring and be like the one who's like, yes, this will be awesome. It's going to be so sexy. It's going to be really fun. You might be the one who gets into it and you're like, this is incredibly hard. It's all my attachment stuff is coming up. Maybe maybe this is my path through healing my attachment wounds. Or maybe I decide, you know what? I'm not doing that work. The point is that you do have to expose yourself to the realities. It can't all be thought experiments because so many people stay in the thought experiment stage of non-monogamy or creative monogamy for years, right? I see so many people who are like, yeah, we've been talking about it, but then actually doing it, then I'd have to know stuff about myself. I mean, that's not the sentence they say, but that's the subtext. Then I would have to know. And I wouldn't have this fantasy anymore. Instead, I'd have real inner knowledge about where my capacity is to experience my partner being wanted by others, or my partner being emotionally close to others, or me trying to share attention between more than one thing. Wow, how will I do that? Nothing beats the lived experience, in particular in a community where people are intentionally exploring this. So you're not doing it alone. And you're not doing it just amongst your monogamous friends who are like, every problem that comes up is now the non-monogamy's fault.
Yes.
We got to get a new container. I love community for this, but we got to get a container that is not going to demonize your exploration. And ideally, in my mind, the container isn't just your local circle, because I feel like there's something powerful about going through this exploration with a coach or a community where it's not your dating pool. Because if you're always in your dating pool, in your exploratory pool, also sharing the problems, the tribulations, all the ways this is so hard for you, like that's not ideal. It muddies the waters, to say the least. We often wind up seeing like cliques happening, in group fighting, people taking sides. How do I know? Because I've been there. So that's why my groups are designed to hold space for people in this like online format where they're like, okay, these are just like-minded individuals, right? They believe in this exploration, but I'm not trying to sleep with them.
Right.
It's not my dating pool.
It's too much when you're exploring it. And then you have all of that on top of it. It already is a lot to go into the exploration. And absolutely, community is so important. And before we talk a little bit more about the community that you have, I would love to get some of your thoughts about jealousy, because I know that this is something that you have researched. And when not anyone, but a lot of people say to me, I could never do non-monogamy because I'd be too jealous. This is the first thing that people go to. And it is the first question. Well, how do you deal with jealousy? It is like the thing that comes up. So I love that you've studied it so much. And I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah. So, jealousy is a huge topic that many people hope can be reduced to a couple of sentences. But I literally wrote my doctoral dissertation on jealousy, and I continue to do qualitative research on jealousy. I can say this, though. Most of us, in fact, I've had thousands of conversations about jealousy, and so far, no one has said, oh, yeah, my parents sat me down and talked to me about jealousy and what we should do with it when it comes up and what its purpose is in relationships. No, we get no educational, emotional instruction on jealousy. So it's okay if you're like, nope, jealousy is a huge red flag. I am staying away from anything that might inspire it.
Mm.
However, monogamy doesn't protect us from jealousy.
No.
It just doesn't. Like, the studies bear it out, not just mine, but many studies bear this out. The violence numbers, where jealousy is cited in domestic violence, those also bear it out. So monogamy itself isn't going to protect us from jealousy either. So what I say is, let's look head on. If we can look at jealousy straight and say, this is a normal human experience, and then delve into, what does it have to teach us? I really, truly believe jealousy has a wisdom of its own.
Mm-hmm.
It can help us identify our attachment wounds. It can help us understand what our boundaries are and what we want. And it can really, really help us get clear on where we have potential growth. We have growth work we could do. And none of that is to make jealousy go away. I have no desire to cure, crush, kill, or excise jealousy, because it's a warning signal. Jealousy shows up. Sometimes it's an overreaction. Sometimes it's not. But I don't want to get rid of it, because sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm thinking about jealousy, and people say, I could never do that, because I say, well, what if your opportunity was to learn about jealousy, learn where your limits are, and learn how to work with jealousy the same way you've learned how to work with anger and sadness? What if it were that simple?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a jealousy masterclass where I break down what jealousy actually is, how it's different from envy, and how people can work with it from a mythological perspective, a typological perspective, because jealousy is messy and most people don't know what to do with it. That's normal. There's nothing weird about you if you don't know. So that's actually at jealousymasterclass.com, because
great.
There's such a need for dealing with jealousy proactively.
Yeah. And I found that jealousy in my work and, work with people, is that it's a surface emotion. Just like you said, it's a warning sign, right? And if we stop at the jealousy, we're missing this luscious opportunity to heal something that's so big underneath. When I was looking at jealousy in terms of non-monogamy, I found that it really boiled down to wanting to feel special. I wanted to feel special, and, which goes to my childhood, and it's super deep, right?
Yeah.
If I would have just stopped at jealousy, I wouldn't have gotten to that awareness, and then how I can find that, finding specialness within myself, how it can show up in my relationships, what I can ask for, and, express my needs to in this moment. It would really be helpful if you just put down your phone and looked at me and just kind of held my hand and looked in my eyes and just had that moment with me, so it's such a wealth of information right underneath it.
Right. And there is the people who were dealing with jealousy with more ease and grace, they're surfaced a 5-step path that they follow time after time after time. So I've written that into several articles, and people can have that information as well, because the jealousy roadmap, it's well known. You can see it when you watch as many stories of jealousy as I have watched. Oh, it's right there. You name it. You notice it. You name it. Right, there it is. I need to navigate my needs. I need to figure out what the story is behind it. I need to narrate it. It's obvious. It's right there. But most of us, like you said, we just want the jealousy to go away. So we point our fingers outwards and we're like, you stop doing whatever you're doing, because I don't want to feel this inside. But that is such a control dependent move, right? So we're easily out of the only thing we really can control, which is our behavior and our response and our requests.
Right. It's a disempowering, right? To say,
Yeah.
you need to change to make me feel better. That again is unconscious relationships. The conscious relationship is, what can I do? What can I look at? What can I go on that path, right? To empower myself to have a different experience.
Right. And to make those really conscious discussions, like I still get, I study jealousy every day. I still experience jealousy. It's not about making it go away, but now I work with it. I'm like, oh, there it is. And I know what moves to make to ease it. So it does not feel life threatening anymore. It feels like energy. And now I have ways to deal with it. And when it does overwhelm me, because jealousy is archetypal, sometimes it will sweep you off your feet.
Yeah.
I have big tools to apply to big jealousy, but we just weren't taught it. So again, totally normal not to know what to do with it. And that's addressable.
Yeah. And so tell me, say again, the website of the masterclass.
Yeah. So the masterclass it's a paid offer, but it's at jealousymasterclass.com. It's my most cost-effective way to like get all of my jealousy material, boom, in one package, including a step-by-step guide that has a template that walks you through like, here's what to do when jealousy is coming up. So jealousymasterclass.com.
I'm sure that is worth every penny.
Yeah, it's just so like, rather than reinvent the wheel, like I have spent the last 20 years like soaked in jealousy, and the last 14 studying it exclusively. Yeah, take my Cliff Notes.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, and can you talk just briefly about your year-long container that you have, and how people can learn more about that?
Yeah, so the year of opening it's that container where you can explore how I want to be expansive. How am I going to open? So some people open all the things and they really get out into the dating right away. Other people take a longer path and they explore different ways of being expansive. But what we do is we meet weekly. So we meet for over the course of a year, 46 times. We meet weekly. Wow. And I offer you tools, relationship technology. I break it all down into really manageable bites. So you just stay with us. And the groups form in this beautiful way. Like it's not a mindless, faceless, like automaton kind of situation. You're with your people. It's less than 20 people per group. You come into the group, they become your people. There's a private signal chat where we talk about like, oh, this is hard. Or how do you think this looks on a dating profile? Like, can I do this? Is this me? Does that reflect me? It's magic. It's like, I didn't know. I've always loved individual coaching, but this container is so special, even for people who've been practicing for a long time, because a lot of times we hacked it together ourselves. And so we don't even know where we're still suffering and we could have it easier. So what I notice is that there's always some people who are brand new and they're just figuring this out. And there's people who have been doing this for 7, 8, 10, 12 years. And they're like, we want to walk through this again and make sure that we're really creating the relationship we want. So theyearofopening.com is where you can find out about that. People can apply to be part of a cohort. I start cohorts a few times a year, and they're really curated, lovely experiences of community. And I'm a researcher, so science-backed, hands-on information.
Oh, I love that. I know we already talked about the importance of community, but really when you are exploring something that is outside of the norm of what you're, I guess maybe town or city, to have that community really to hold you, I think, as you do that exploration and allow it to be messy and accept you in your messiness and love you in your messiness and acknowledge and accept is really makes all the difference. I love that, Joli. And any other way we can connect with you?
Well, if people are considering opening, but they're not sure whether they're ready, I have a quiz that you can go to. It's 10 questions. I based it out of my research, joliquiz.com, joliquiz.com. You can go there and that will do two things. One, it'll tell you, where are you right now? Many people get the return response, you are not ready. That's fine. The idea is to figure out, am I ready to do this now? But no matter where you fall on this spectrum, you'll be invited to come to my free salon where we talk about How do you do this well if you choose to?
Mm.
And from there, you can learn more about how the many paths that this might unfold for you, because it really isn't just about picking up a book and saying, I'm going to do it their way. It's about being presented experiments and being invited into a process. So if you aren't sure, the place you can start your journey is going to joliquiz.com. You take the quiz, you'll get emails from me afterwards inviting you into a process and inviting you into my world where I talk about this every day.
That's beautiful. So we'll link all of that in the show notes. And I want to end on that one thing that you said, is that it is a process. Regardless of whether you choose non-monogamy or you choose monogamy, creative monogamy. I also talk about solo amory, where you're choosing to have the most, the most like highlighted relationship is with yourself, which is really where it always begins. But it is a process. So allowing yourself to not be at the destination, but to just go on the journey, and being with someone like Dr. Joli Hamilton, who can help guide you and give you some direction with your process, could make all the difference. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I love this conversation, and everyone, please go connect. Thanks so much for listening to the Relationship Diversity Podcast. Want to learn more about relationship diversity? I've got a free guide I'd love to send you. Go to www.relationshipdiversitypodcast.com to get yours sent right to you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast. You being here and participating in the conversation about relationship diversity is what helps us create a space of inclusivity and acceptance together. The more comfortable and normal it is to acknowledge the vast and varied relating we all do, the faster we'll shift to a paradigm of conscious, intentional, and diverse relationships. New episodes are released every Thursday. Stay connected with me through my website, carriejaroslow.com, Instagram, or TikTok. Stay curious. Every relationship is as unique as you are. Are you feeling stuck or unfulfilled in your intimate relationship? Do all your relationships end in the same way? Do you feel like you've lost the spark in your current relationship? Can you never even find one person who you want to explore a relationship with? If you answered yes to any of those questions, are sick and tired of feeling like a failure in your relationships, and desperately desire a different experience, then my 8-week deep reprogramming intensive may be the answer for you. In this program, I work individually with you for 8 transformative weeks. We'll identify the subconscious programming that's keeping you stuck and shift it to a new affirming belief systems. We go deep, we get real, we get results. This is healing unlike anything you've ever experienced before. Here's what people are saying. Jordan from North Carolina said, more has shifted in 8 weeks of working with Carrie than 10 years of psychotherapy. Jane from Sanford, North Carolina said, it's honestly changed my life. And Cassie from Santa Barbara, California said, Carrie's laser precision in helping me diagnose where the stuck energy was helped me make positive movement in our first session alone. Absolutely transformational. I love being a guide and witness to these courageous people who claim that they were done with their past experiences and ready for something different. I'm opening a limited number of spots for 2023 and would love to help you permanently transform your relationship experience. To set up a free 30-minute clarity call where I'll help you uncover your number one block to fulfilling relationships, connect with me through the link in the show notes. You are worthy of experiencing deep fulfillment and love in your relationships. This intensive work will help you get there.